Hey y'all, it's Heel Heat time.
Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles and this is a Heel Heat Top 10. The topic of this Top 10? Top 10 Dusty Rhodes Matches. Now, as we all know, this past Thursday the American Dream Dusty Rhodes passed away. Kind of surprisingly, kind of hit us as a shock to all of us in the wrestling community, myself included. I, like countless others, have been and always will be a Dusty Rhodes fan. He's a guy that brought a lot of people to the table and probably one of the most innovative and influential wrestlers and bookers of all time. Now saying that, this is my tribute to him with my top 10 Dusty Rhodes matches, so let's jump right into it. Number 10, Dusty Rhodes versus Superstar Billy Graham at Madison Square Garden in 1977. The second of their two matches. This is a Texas death match. Ended up with Superstar getting the win in kind of a strange way. If you really want to watch, you can. It's on the Dusty Rhodes compilation DVD. You could probably seek out and find it. It's a good match. It's a cool thing to see at the time. Before the nationalization and the globalization of professional wrestling, still in the territory systems, you had one of the premier wrestlers from the South wrestling the premier wrestler in the Northeast in the WWF versus the premier guy coming from Championship for Wrestling from Florida. A cool dream match of the time, something that was awesome, something fun, something that gets us started off. Now our number 9 is from Starrcade 1987, Dusty Rhodes versus the Total Package Lex Luger. You're going to notice somewhat of a theme going through here. Dusty Rhodes liked to work with and put over younger talent. I don't think that any time in Luger's career he looked any better than this run where he was part of the Horsemen, working against guys like Dusty Rhodes and Barry Windham and the Rock and Roll Express, Nikita Koloff and others. They really tried to bring him along and make him what he eventually would be, which would be a main event superstar. And Dusty just went all out on this one. Dusty picks up the win, wins the U.S. title. Just a great match with a good, young, impressive Lex Luger versus one of the ringmasters in Dusty Rhodes. Our number 8 is from Dusty's WWF run, mostly known as the Polka Dot era. A lot of people have mixed feelings on that. I liked it. I thought they gave him something really crappy with the polka dots, and he really made it work, and he really made it to his advantage. The match in question would be him versus the Honky Tonk Man at Summerslam 1989. Again, it's another guy, the Honky Tonk Man, that doesn't really get the respect he deserves. He really was a fantastic heel. He was a little bit overshadowed in the company he worked with, guys like Ted DiBiase being there and Bobby the Brain Heenan and his group and all the other fabulous heels that were there at the time. But you got to remember, Honky Tonk Man carried the Intercontinental Championship, which at that time really meant something, for a year and a half. And the fans absolutely hated him. And here you got this guy, Dusty Rhodes, who the fans absolutely love. It was a great face versus heel matchup. Dusty picks up the win. Everybody goes home happy. Now our number 7 match is versus Dusty Rhodes. I'd like to say he was a Dusty Rhodes protege, common foe, someone that always seemed to be where Dusty would be, and that was Barry Windham. Barry Windham and Dusty Rhodes had some fantastic matches. A lot from the championship wrestling from Florida days, which unfortunately we haven't really seen come into wide release as of yet. I'm sure they will in time. This one's from the Great American Bash in 1988. A good match, another good example of Dusty Rhodes trying to put over a younger talent. Windham picks up the win, really solidifies himself as someone that is a threat in the, at that time, the NWA or Jim Crockett Promotions. Just a fun, cool match. You see a guy in Barry Windham who's kind of the evolution of what his father, Blackjack Mulligan, and Dusty Rhodes and Dick Murdoch were doing in the 70s, coming along in the 80s and bringing that similar style. Barry Windham, a guy that doesn't get any, much like I said with Honky Tonk Man, very underrated wrestler, probably one of the 10 best wrestlers there's ever been, and does not get the credit he deserves. Probably, the guy was amazing from the standpoint of once you put him in the ring, he could do absolutely anything. Now our number 6 is going to follow the same trend. This is from later in Dusty's career, and it's another young kid he's putting over. And from ECW's Living Dangerously 2000, Dusty Rhodes versus Steve Corino in a bull rope match. This was the culmination of a couple-month feud where Corino was throwing jabs at Dusty Rhodes using the bionic elbow, calling it the Corino elbow, or I forget what he even called it. Wearing Dusty Rhodes style cowboy boots and cowboy hat to the ring. Dusty came in, and to his credit, he made Steve Corino look like $1 million. They had an absolute bloodbath of a match. Something that's not for the squeamish. It's a, classic ECW style match with Dusty's classic bull rope stipulation in there. Big Dust picks up the win with the bionic elbow, because how else should it end? It was a great match, great fun. Again, in another time where you see Dusty Rhodes working with a younger talent, like in this case Steve Corino, who needs that little push to get them to the top. Now our number 5 match is from one of Dusty Rhodes' greatest rivalries, and dare I say, probably his greatest rivalry. Dusty Rhodes versus Tully Blanchard from Starrcade 1986 in a First Blood match. After a violent match, this is almost a 2-year feud going on at this point. Tully picks up the win at the end, kind of nefariously, keeps it going on. I love the fact that every time that Dusty Rhodes and Tully Blanchard wrestled each other, it was different, and it was intense, and it was violent. And you really believe that these two men hated each other, and they wanted to kill each other when they got into the ring with each other. It felt the same way when he would face off against any of the other horsemen, but to me, him versus Tully Blanchard was the epitome of what Dusty Rhodes was as a face versus one of the great heels of all time in Tully Blanchard. Now our number 4 match. Speaking of the 4 horsemen, we have the first ever War Games. We have Dusty Rhodes teaming up with Nikita Koloff, the Road Warriors, and Precious Paul Ellering going up against the 4 horsemen of Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, Lex Luger, with their manager James J. Dillon. This comes to us from Great American Bash 1987. I'm going to date myself a little bit here. Now, back in the day, if you're as old as I am or older, or in the same age range, you'll remember that Pro Wrestling Illustrated would have articles, or not articles, of course they had articles, it was a magazine, advertisements, and you could send away for video cassettes that Pro Wrestling Illustrated put out. And a lot of them were, being from the Northeast as I was, I got the NWA TV show. So I was interested in a lot of their matches. So you could send away and get the Great American Bash on video cassette, or Starrcade, or sometimes it would be an AWA compilation, or the World Class Championship Wrestling compilation, or something from Japan. Anyway, make a long story short, this is one of the tapes I sent away for, And it's actually one of the video cassette tapes, and if you remember video cassette tapes, again, I'm dating myself, you could wear them out. You could absolutely denigrate a video cassette tape if you played it too much. This happened with this. By the time I lost this cassette tape in a move or letting a friend borrow or whatever happened to it, it disappeared in the early 2000s when, to be perfectly honest, I really didn't care about carrying around VHS tapes anymore. By the time I got to that period, this tape was so denigrated that it was almost awful to watch. You couldn't even barely get through it. It was terrible because I watched and watched this match over and over again. It was such an amazing concept, such a cool match, such a great way to encompass all these feuds going up against the Four Horsemen in one match. And of course, the good guys pick up the win. J.J. Dillon quits when he gets, I believe he gets a Doomsday device, lands on his shoulder. He quits because of the pain in his shoulder. Now, our number 3 match in the Dusty's Greatest Matches compilation here, I guess, is Dusty Rhodes versus Terry Funk from Championship Wrestling from Florida, a bunkhouse match. Now, I don't know the year because I've seen it many years after it happened, and I've never seen a video that gives a year. If you know what year it came from, that's fine, that's great. This is it's one of the classic matches. Dusty Rhodes, Terry Funk had a huge feud going on in Florida. This is anything goes, the Funker versus Dusty. Dusty picks up the win when some of Funk's allies come down to help him. And you can look it up. I believe Daily Motion has this on there, or at least has clips of it on there. If you look it up, Funk versus Dusty Rhodes, you'll see what I mean. I don't want to spoil it too much, but because I know this is one of the matches that probably not too many of you seen. Go look it up, though. It's worth watching. It's worth seeing. Where some of the style that would incorporate and go into the 80s style, into the era of Jim Crockett Promotions, into the era of what Memphis was doing, and even bleed over fittingly into what ECW would eventually do. You get to see some of the building blocks of that in this match. Just a classic rivalry, two classic wrestlers, two of the greats of all time, going at it with absolutely no regard of anything other than destroying the other. Now, our number 2 match is the second time that a match with this guy comes up on our list. And I said it before when I said it earlier, Dusty Rhodes versus Tully Blanchard. My favorite of all of Dusty Rhodes' feuds. This one is from Great American Bash 1985. This is a cage match where Tully and Dusty absolutely destroy each other. Stipulations are Dusty wins, he gets a TV title and gets Baby Doll for a month, I believe it was. Just an amazing match. Two tough sons of bitches beating the crap out of each other. And just everything you wanted to see. And like I said earlier with the match from 1986, which is a year and a half after this, the real feud, the real animosity starts building here. And you start getting what turns into one of the great feuds of all time. And this is absolutely a fantastic match. If you were to ask me to point out some matches from the 1980s that I feel, exemplify what 1980s wrestling was about, this is one of the ones I'm going to point you to, because this was a great match, a great angle, a great feud with two great wrestlers. Now, before we get into our number 1, like we always do about this time with our top 10, we have a little thing called the best of the rest. It's not these are the things that didn't exactly make the top 10 list in no particular order, but they were considered. First off, Dusty Rhodes and Sapphire versus Macho Man Randy Savage and Sensational Sherri from Wrestlemania 6. Not the greatest technical match in the world. Great match storyline-wise. Dusty Rhodes and Sapphire were magic together. I thought they were absolutely amazing. I love the pairing. I love Sapphire and Dusty together. Really upset that they split them up. I thought they could have done so much more with them. Team Dusty and Sapphire picks up the win. Just a fun match, just an interesting match. It's a match where Elizabeth comes out and helps them, as opposed to helping Macho Man, who everybody knows the history with her and Macho. Just a great match. Again, two of the greats of all time going at it. Add in Sherri Martel, add in Sapphire. Just a fun, good match. Cool match for me. Something I really enjoy. Something I go back to and watch again and again and again. And next up from our Best of the Rest, Dusty Rhodes and the Road Warriors versus the Powers of Pain and Ivan Koloff from the first ever Clash of the Champions. What a stacked card that was. You got everything on there from Flair versus Sting to this match here. This was for the 6-man tag team championship, if you can imagine that. The roster in Jim Crockett promotion was so stacked that they had a TV title, a US title, a tag title, a US tag title, and a 6-man title. They had 5 major titles at that time. And everything filled it up. And if you think about it, between the tag team, the US tag team, and the 6-man title, that's 7 wrestlers. So that's 7 wrestlers. Let's say if they each only have one team they're feuding with, that's 14 wrestlers. And as you can see by the quality of wrestlers in this match, the Road Warriors, one of the great tag teams of all time. Powers of Pain, a very underrated tag team, but still very good. And Ivan Koloff, a former WWF heavyweight champion, an absolute legend in wrestling, a guy that probably should be in the WWF Hall of Fame, but he's not, and that's another story, another argument for another day. Just a fun match. The Road Warriors and Dusty pick up the win. Anytime the Road Warriors and Dusty wrestled with or against each other, it was always fun. Now, before we get into our number one, I'm going to, at this point, say if we've left something off the list, or if you think we've left something off the list, place something up too high, put something too low, altogether forgot something, let us know what you think. Hit us up on our Facebook, hit us up on our Twitter, put it in the comments right down there in that box. Also hit like and share. Get this spread out all over the place. Now, coming from that, our number one Dusty Rhodes match. Dusty Rhodes versus the Nature Boy Ric Flair from Great American Bash 1996. Steel cage match. Dusty Rhodes wins his 3rd NWA World Championship. I know you were all waiting for it, waiting to hear me say Ric Flair's name because you remember the legendary battles. This was the apex of the Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, 4 Horsemen, Dusty Rhodes war. This was Dusty Rhodes finally getting his comeuppance and beating the nefarious 4 Horsemen, getting Ric Flair all by himself in the cage, winning the match, becoming the world champion for the 3rd time, and giving you that feel-good moment after a year and a half plus, almost 2 years, of seeing the Horsemen skid away with beating Dusty Rhodes. You finally got Dusty beating Ric Flair. You finally got what everybody wanted to see, which was a great match, an amazingly fun match. 2 guys that know once they go into a ring, they're master craftsmen at wrestling. This would be like watching Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo going into a studio and painting a picture. That's how good these 2 wrestlers are. You're watching 2 of the absolute best that could do it as good or better than anybody else in the history of wrestling. Your perfect face in Dusty Rhodes. One of your great all-time heels in Ric Flair. What more could you possibly want from a wrestling match? But basically, that is the gist of it. That is my top 10 Dusty Rhodes matches. Again, feel free to leave your comments. I made this as a tribute to the man, to Dusty Rhodes, someone that had a big impact in my life, and I know he had a big impact in a lot of your lives. A guy that was a legend. When we throw around words like legend, Hall of Famer, all-time great, sometimes it's hyperbole, sometimes we say it a little too much so it loses its impact. But I dare you to find a professional wrestler that Dusty Rhodes hasn't influenced. I dare you. Whether directly or indirectly, Dusty Rhodes has influenced every single professional wrestler there is alive right now. And there is no question about that. He is an absolute legend. He's on the pantheon of sports entertainers, professional wrestlers, whatever you want to call it. One of the all-time greats. A guy that's touched the hearts of millions and millions and millions of people. A guy that's done more for professional wrestling than almost anybody you can imagine. Just a great man, a great ambassador from the sport. I met the man back in 2010. He was absolutely gracious. He was absolutely good to me. He was fun. He was funny. He was willing to sit there and laugh with me. He shook my hand. He signed a picture for me. He signed my ticket for the show. He just was a great guy. Again, we say it too much, but one of the all-time legends. Rest in peace, American Dream. And thank you for everything you've done for the sport of professional wrestling and for the fans of professional wrestling. Thank you, Dusty. Rest in peace, Dream. My name is George Coles, and this has been another Heel Heat Top 10.